is whole muscle curing?
So that is one of the main categories that I have arrived at in my head, and you'll find this in a lot of good books on curing, of which there is a small number, but they're growing. There's whole muscle curing, there is fermenting, and then fatting is one that I would add. And the reason the things that all of those three categories, those methods achieve, they achieve preservation. And unfortunately, most cured meat in America is not cured so as to preserve it. In fact, one of the things that you tend to have to prove to the inspection agencies, whether that be county health departments or even the USDA, is that you are not curing. You have not curing for preservation. You have no pretense towards making your bacon keep until the end of the cosmos. In fact, you have a very rigid and well-defined use-by date in your HACCP, in the plan that you create for the making of that product. So we can preface all of this by saying that one thing, that difference that we regard curing as preservation, that changes everything. Mm-hmm. So
preservation either by fatting, fermenting, or whole muscle curing.
Right. Yep. I mean, and
we'll talk about fatting another time. But
so to me, that is bacon with integrity, and this might be, a silly philosophical prejudice of my own, which it most definitely is. Mm-hmm. The notion that you would cure to preserve. So no other cookbook that I have found, let's see, can I really say that? Except for ones written in the 19th century, would consider preservation to be part of curing. And for me, it's my aesthetic, it's my philosophy, it's my desire for the sublime. I think that if something could be super tasty and never rot, that's like almost a magic thing. That defies the boundaries of terrestrial expectation. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just a little too good to be true to me. And not only can you hold both of those things at once, extravagant flavor and just thrift, but they actually feed each other. So like the longer you let your ham hang in your kitchen, the better it will taste. And that is a pattern that echoes all across phenomenological reality, mm-hmm. as we perceive things. And that's a powerful pattern. And to me, that's what bacon can be. Mm-hmm. That's what cured meat can be. So I'm always trying to ride that line. So what that means, though, is that when I'm curing something, I have more goals than just, I want to nail the flavor. That is definitely like number one goal. Yeah. My other number one goal is that it preserve. Uh-huh. And I hold them in the exact same tenacity. Yeah. And that's kind of the conflict that makes it really challenging and super rewarding when you get it. And it also, this is my contention, it actually leaves a crack in the door for serendipity, for things to go better, much better than you expected them.
Salami, can you mention the difference between bacon and maybe the thyme and salt difference that you would salt like a leg?
Oh, yeah.
A leg versus a cheek versus a...
Right. So that recipe that I gave, which I hope is coherent, for belly, it's about 4 days, adding a little bit of salt where you see the previous application dissolved and pouring off the liquid that accumulates in the tub. That's the recipe. That happens to be the recipe, so-called, for all whole muscle cures. Mm-hmm. And
in place of the salt, or the salt that you might use, mm-hmm. it might actually be like what we use is half salt, half coarse sea salt, half sugar. Because sugar also pulls water out.
Does osmodification.
That's where you could get tricky and fancy and put in flavorings of different
bay leaves and juniper berries and garlic.
And that's all.
Black pepper. Yeah. Whatever you want.
Cayenne, whatever you want to get fancy with. Knowing that really if you have quality pork, then you don't need it, but it could help. And if you have bad pork, no amount of spicing will really help it that much. So, but anyway, so covering that recipe, that salt mix, that's where you can get creative and add some sugar.
Yeah, you can vary that, up to half 50% sugar.
Yeah.
And or way less, it's totally up to you. So that is the basic recipe. That works for everything. That works for dry cured ham. That works for guanciale, which is the jowl or jowl bacon. That works for solid slabs of back fat. That's it. Mm-hmm. Any way that you can track the removal of water and apply salt. The only difference would be, a leg that is 6 inches thick of solid lean meat is going to take longer subjection to that process, more days than a 1.5, 2.5 inch thick belly that is 70% fat or 60% fat. So thickness, the thicker the piece, the more days on the salt. The leaner the piece, the more days on the salt, because meat, lean flesh, is more like 70% water by weight. I think it's weight. And fat is like 20%. So there's just more water to pull out of a lean piece of meat. And the leanest and the largest concentration of lean meat on any quadruped is the back leg, which is where the prosciutto and the ham comes from. And so when I use that process on back legs, I'm looking more at like 2 weeks, But again, that's a rough estimate. That's roughly. You have to discern the signs, track the reduction of liquid, witness the darkening of the color and this gradual stiffening of the flesh. I would say hams, again, matter of weeks. Bellies, a matter of days, probably less than a week. And yeah, that's everything. That's how you could cure copa.
Cheeks. How do you do cheek? Like
same exact. The jowls are the same thickness as a belly.
So roughly a handful of days.
Yeah. So what the difference is not the ingredients in the dry cure, the dry rub, Right. It's just salt and sugar. Maybe it's just salt. It's the physiological origins. It's where the cut comes from. So jowl fat is different than belly fat. That's what makes jowls different than bellies. And that's, again, that is a flavor different is reflective of the harvest, of the integrity of the pig. Yeah. So, and those will be the primary differences to each cure, is where it comes from on the pig and how long you hang it. So, and again, all a matter of personal taste. After the meat of any kind, leg, jowl, or belly, or loin, goes through that curing process that we describe, you can rinse it, dry it, and hang it for as long or as short a time as you desire. Just know that the longer it hangs, the drier, stiffer, and harder it will become. And so for bacon, like we said earlier, that's very early. You start cutting into that right away. And by the way, when you cut into the bacon, you cut a slice off or 16 slices and you fry them all up, you just hang the slab up again. That's it. You don't have to do anything to the exposed surface. It's good to go. Because you have cured the total mass of the meat. And that is probably the second, what achieves that, the full curing of the total depth of that 2-inch belly or even the 6-inch ham, is the period of equalization, which just means the salt that was on the surface through the diffusion and osmosis has continued to travel all the way throughout the full thickness of the whole muscle. And that takes a while. So with bacon, I say, and again, it depends on the humidity, but in our climate here, that takes about 2 weeks of hanging before it's fully cured all the way through to the skin. And with a leg, it's much longer. That's like 2 months. And again, you don't have to even wait till that equalization has completed. Although real bacon masters, will tell you that it's not cured until equalization, if you're going to be a perfectionist about it, which is great. I recommend you do. I like to wait on the equalization. But the surface is cured even before then, and so it's safe to hang. You will just notice it will be punchy right around the surface, right along the ridge of your bacon slice, and completely bland down by the fat where the skin was. So it won't be equalized. The texture won't have achieved a density that is more pleasing in bacon and in cured meats. So that's the recipe for all the parts.
Okay. Yeah.
And that is essentially the one that I follow. But I have such a larger volume here that I do at least 2 pigs at a time, that I have developed a slightly less hands-on method that I can give really quick. And this is specifically for bacon. So basically, specifically for things that are 2 to 4 inches in thickness. So I do this with copas, I do this with back bacon, I do this with belly bacon, I do this with jowls. And I put a whole bunch of dry cure in a tub. And right now I think I'm at like, what is it? It's something like 10 pounds of salt to 2.5 pounds of sugar.
Oh, okay.
So it's more salty and lots of juniper berries. And I ensure that they're relatively the same grind. So I use fine sea salt and relatively fine sugar, and I whiz up the juniper berries really fine. Dump that into my tabula rasa. And then I lay down, meat side down, the belly, and then I take hand right in that tub, right on top of that salt mix. So there's kind of a lot of salt mix. And then I rub the salt mix all over the belly, and when I lift it up, it's got a perfect even coating. Then I lay that meat side up in another tub with salt on the bottom. And the tub it's sitting in has holes, and I nest that tub into one that does not have holes, so that the bacon will drain. It will not accumulate water. The bottom piece will not be sitting in a brine because the brine's draining into the bottom tub. And then I do that with the next belly. And I make a whole stack in the same tub. So stacking bellies is a great way to go for bacon quantity curing. And then I put them in the walk-in in my refrigerator for 5 days. And I don't touch them. I don't even think about them. Yeah. They just sit there and they drain. And then on day 5, I repeat the process. But this time, I only lay the bellies down and put salt on the meat side surface. I don't rub it in on the sides or the skin. Because again, the easiest thing is to oversalt. And restack, and then they all go in the walk-in again for another 5 days. And then on day 10, after a total of 10 days, I take them all out and I rinse off the salt, and then I give them a 20-minute soak in fresh water. And the 20 minutes just cuts the edge off of the salt a little bit. And then I let them hang for a couple days, which is exactly what I did this morning with all this bacon hanging above our heads.
Let's see if we could show a little all of that.
There it is. Lots of bellies up there. So that is now going to hang for, if I'm going to turn I have a dehumidifier in here, and I'm going to turn it on. And by tomorrow morning, there will be a pellicle on these guys.
Yeah, I see little drips coming down every now and again.
So the surface will be dry, which means a dry surface attracts the sweet, wonderful flavors from the smoke. A wet surface with puddled water that's still like moist and shiny acquires the Stygian bitterness of smoke, which is not so nice.